Good afternoon, everybody. Out of respect for your time, we're going to go ahead and get started. We've given a complimentary 5-minute wait period for colleagues to join us, and we hope that some more will continue to be making their way in as they come over. We also want to welcome our colleagues in both Camper and Tulare as we're live streaming out there. We hope that we have the opportunity to not only engage with you there, but if you have any questions or comments, that we'll be able to send those in for us so that we can interact with you today also. Welcome back to the fall semester. For those of you who I haven't had the privilege of meeting, I see some of our students in here today. My name is Thea Trimble, Superintendent President with College of the Sequoias, and we're excited to be back in front of you and giving you an update on the status of our college accreditation response process. The purpose of today's forum is really kind of threefold. It's going to give you a general overview of the work that we've been doing over the course of the summer and how we've been responding since we had our first accreditation response task force this fall. Secondly, we're going to give you an update of the forums that are planned for the remainder of the fall and an opportunity to talk about a special strategy we have in place called the Implementation Task Force to make sure that all the work that we're doing has a system of support for it to be implemented. And then finally, we're going to give you an update on the status of the infamous show cause report, the hundreds of page document itself, how we've put some teams together to get that final document prepared. And sharing with me in the presentation today will be Dr. Trimble and Dr. La Serna. So I'd also like to recognize Tony Maldonado. If you don't know Tony, he's a regular at many of our meetings, but he's here on behalf of the campus newspaper. I'm going to click through a few slides. Hopefully, and I say this honestly, hopefully now these are looking pretty familiar because they should. The idea is that it takes a number of times to look at, see, and understand and internalize the processes and the changes. So to just give you a quick update of where we are on the major components of our accreditation response. You know that our theme is COS 2.0. It's that upgraded version. It's our new and improved. It's an opportunity for us to be more efficient, more effective, and built around strong systems and a strong set of core values. Along those lines, we've got 3 manuals that are kind of at the heart of guiding our change. The first is the Governance and Decision-Making Manual. Everybody has had an opportunity to see and hear a little bit, or maybe a lot, about that. How it works, how it's operating, and we want you to know that it's complete and being ready to be prepared for print. The center of that governance and decision-making manual is this diagram, which we spent weeks, days, hours, months last year really discussing and finalizing in terms of the structure for how decisions are made, how authority is shared, and how responsibility and accountability affect us in our decision-making process at College of the Sequoias. So you should be familiar now with the fact that there's 3 senates: Governance Senate, Academic Senate, Student Senate. They're the ones anointed by law to have recommendation authority. And underneath them are committees that have functioned under the Academic Senate, 4 institution-wide committees now that function under the District Governance Senate, and inter-club committees that are a part of the Student Senate. So as you get into the manual and as you read how it operates, in this manual are the roles, responsibilities, timelines, and commitments for these entities to function in a healthy, transparent governance decision-making process. The next one is the Integrated Planning Manual. It goes right alongside with the governance and the decision-making. You're familiar with this diagram now, and these are the components of it. What we've tried to do is put all in one place the college's mission statement, which is really derived and set forth through a collaborative process and adopted by our board. Our master plan is a 10-year plan, and we're at the back end now. It was from 2005 to 2015, so we're near the end of our current 10-year plan. Strategic plan is a shorter term plan, and the strategic plan requires an annual update, an annual review. And this is the process that we've tried to build in place to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable annually for planning, for resource allocation, for implementation of new strategies, for an assessment and a measure of those strategies, and then a report out on the success and progress of those. And from these results, we start the cycle over again. And the way that it works primarily for departments and divisions is through our institutional program review. And then, of course, the centerpiece for all of this is that we have to be driven by data information, research, to support the procedures and the processes of our planning. Next is the area of outcomes and assessments. It doesn't have its own manual, but it has an outcome and assessment cycle. The outcomes and assessments are parts of those planning processes that you saw, and they're at the heart of them. And now we're proud to say that we've got our student learning outcomes in order for our courses. We have them on our syllabi. We have assessments for those student learning outcomes, and we've built a cycle, a 3-year cycle, for how the outcomes can be implemented and assessed. Not every SLO can be assessed in every course every year. That's not practical, so we have a way of tracking that now. We have participation in professional reflection, that closing the loop. At the end of an assessment time, a semester or a year, we get together with faculty, we stop, we look at the results of the SLOs that we set out to teach in our courses, and we reflect on those results as a process of continuous improvement. Same thing is true for the non-instructional areas on our campuses. Our supervisors and managers in these areas are responsible for service area outcomes, things like student services, grounds and custodial, maintenance and operations, fiscal operations. We too have service area outcomes and things that we need to be checking and measuring against those action plans that we have put into place. And then finally, again, when we operate and we submit our program review analysis for the year, it should incorporate what we set out to do and what our outcomes were and how nicely and how closely they were tied to the institutional objectives in that strategic plan. And the beautiful thing now is we think we have a good piece of software that's starting to provide an easy and user-friendly way for us to compile all of that and receive it on a regular basis. And that software is called TrackDat. Yes, sir. I would love to take your question.
Under the service area outcome, does that include campus needs also?
Yes. They would be under the umbrella of student services, and student services has service area outcomes. Thank you. And then the last of the manuals is the resource allocation manual. And the resource allocation manual is just that. It's a manual that's set out to codify for us the state budget process and what the timelines are for how that works. Senior management and the board of trustees developing the major budget assumptions for the year as we begin to plan our budget. The Budget Committee, which now functions under District Governance Senate, begins a process of reviewing, sharing, and informing not only themselves but the campus at large between the months of February and May, when the college's budget development process is underway. Departments and divisions are given drafts of their tentative budgets each spring for the next year and are involved in the opportunity to help prepare and develop their budgets. The board then adopts the annual budget in June. One note that I didn't put on here is that if the state legislature does their work and adopts their budget on time, which is normally before June 15th or certainly by July 1st, then the local board is also required to revise and correct their budget by September with any changes that the state legislature may have adopted in the budget after the board did their work in June. So we do our best guess, our best estimates, and adopt a budget in June. Then the state adopts their actual budget, and we come back in September and realign where there might be any gaps. Okay? And then finally, Finally, we have a process in place now, and I don't mean finally like we have never had this before. I meant close to the end of the list now. We have a process in place for what's called above base funding. And in most years, we've had above base funding in College of the Sequoias. It's an allocation that comes out in our budget. It's an opportunity for our departments, divisions, programs to compete, if you will, to submit requests for proposals for additional funding for specific things in their departments and divisions. That happens as a result of us going through our program review. And in our program review, justifying and explaining the rationale and showing the data and the research to support the additional resources that you need, specifically for how they will help achieve those institutional objectives in the college's strategic plan. So it's a way of taking our bureaucracy and kind of lining up all of the resources to point in the direction of the college's overall institutional objectives. And then we have a priority process in place now that's probably similar to what we've done in the past, but more complete, more clearly explained now, more codified, and with a prescribed timeline to it. So when this resource allocation manual comes out, this I think might be one of our best sellers, because people are going to, as opposed to the governance and the integrated planning, you're going to want to know about above base funding and how to get that and what the timelines are for that. All of that's spelled out in the allocation manual.
Excuse me, what are the timelines?
Boy, if I answer this correctly, I should get something special, right? It goes a little bit something like this. For above base funding, the board will, remember I said a moment ago, the board adopts their budget in June and then makes any adjustments after the state budget in September. So once we get our budget adopted this September, which is coming up in our next board meeting, we will be making a recommendation to our board for an allocation of our money that goes into above base funding. So in September, we'll know the above base budget amount for the college. Then that's when the cycle of program review, everybody who's been up for program review this year, goes through submission of their program reviews. It takes a month or so, maybe a little bit longer, for those to all get read, and then the budget committee starts the process. Actually, I take that back. They go from the program review result process into the departments and the divisions under the deans. So there's about it's kind of an October time frame to get the program review stuff prioritized. It's going to take more than a month. It's going to go from actually October through final decision and final ranking in March. That's really the answer you wanted to know there. When does it all end? So in a normal cycle, we had this conversation. In a normal cycle, I would be requesting dollars through my program review in the fall, hoping to get that approved early spring between January and March, so that I'm able to purchase equipment, buy whatever it is, plan whatever I need that spring for implementation the fall of the next year, or maybe if it's a short enough turnaround, to have something in place before the end of that academic year. I didn't recite every month, but I could have. I was ready to. All right. The response task force reconvened last week for the first time, and I just wanted to point out to you that we are a task force, and you'll remember in our new governance structure, task forces have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this task force is going to exist from August through October of this year, and then as the old saying goes, our work here is done. We have to hand the institution off to the actual systems and structures that we've built. So we're meeting for the first 2 weeks. We met last Thursday. We will meet this Thursday. After that, we will meet once a month in September, and once a month is our final meeting in October. We're tying up loose ends that the task forces may not have completed when we broke for the spring. And we're also, as a task force, working in subgroups to take a look at the questions that that institutions may be asked when a visiting team comes so that we can quiz ourselves to make sure we haven't forgotten anything and that we know how best to respond to those questions or where to direct to them if those questions are asked. And then we're also spending some time looking at our current board policies and those manuals that I just pointed out to you. And if we see something in our manual that's a little bit in conflict with what our policy is, we have to propose the revision to our policy to get it lined up with the new manual. So that's the work that the task force will be doing between now and October.
How does the bookstore determine how many of one subject books to order per class? Because my experience with the bookstore is that they run out very quickly. And maybe there's more than a row per class than what they anticipated.
Okay, his question is, how does the bookstore determine how many books to order and to make sure that they have enough for a particular class? In his experience, there have been times when the bookstore has run out of the books that they need to order. I'm going to look to one of the two VPs to see if you have any knowledge about how Doriana goes about actually requesting, because I know she gets requests from division chairs and numbers are turned into her, but I don't know the exact process. Our Vice President of Student Services will try to respond. This is Brent Calvin.
Thanks for your question. And I'm sorry if our bookstores run out of books before you had a chance to purchase them. Generally what they do is they look at previous semesters, previous years. They look at the number of students that were enrolled in a given class, and they look at what percentage of them bought books from our institution versus going to one of the few bookstores down Mooney. And if that number has traditionally been about 80% of our students, then we'd ramp that up a little bit and maybe plan for 85 or 90% of those students buying them from us as opposed to one of the other bookstores. If you feel like that number is too low, certainly you're more than welcome to share that information with our bookstore manager. That's the kind of feedback that we're always looking for.
Okay, I had mentioned earlier that we have a series of forums scheduled for this early this semester, and we have a strategy called the Implementation Task Force, and it's my privilege right now to introduce Dr. Thea Trimble. Many of you know Thea, and I don't want to miss this opportunity also while I'm introducing her to thank her. There were a number of faculty who put in countless hours this summer. They were here for summer school, but the bottom line is they were doing a lot of other stuff to help us with this. And because Dr. Trimble's our one faculty member who's been on a number of different accrediting visiting teams, she's also served as our resident expert. Been in my office a number of times. What I love about you, Thea, is you're not afraid to bang on my door and tell me what I'm forgetting, and if I'm doing something that needs to be done differently, she's there to make sure that we cuss and discuss and get it all worked out. And so we wouldn't be where we are today without Dr. Trimble. So thank you, Thea.
Thank you, Stan. I feel odd using this microphone. I teach in here and I never use a microphone because shy and retiring, I'm not. One of the things that under normal circumstances would have been happening is that as the accreditation process proceeded and the report was starting to be written, drafts would go out, people would have a lot of time for it to come back, and you know, you've missed something, you misrepresented this, what evidence do we need? That's missing. We don't have the time to do that. But by the same token, when the visiting team comes, they're going to want to know whether or not the community of College of the Sequoias District understands what happened. So where were we? What were we doing wrong? We all need to understand what we've all been working towards for the last 6 months. And then, what are our plans for going forward? So the idea that we're going to use for the forums is to take some of the major recommendations that came from the site visit team last year. And grouped under those recommendations, we're going to present in the forums basically where we were, what we've accomplished now, and what our action plans are going forward. It's really important for our action plans that they be meaningful, because, again, that's what they're looking at. They want to look at the fact that the college has owned where we were. We've worked really hard to get where we are now. And then how are we going to sustain it in the future? How are we going to make sure that this does not happen again? For those of you that have read the report and the Commission's action letter, that was their issue. That was their number one issue. That we have, in the past, had similar issues, similar recommendations. We got partway. We did implement changes, and we started to make it better. And then we just lost focus. So our action plans have to carry us forward. And so it's important that everyone in the district understand what our action plans are and how we're going to go forward. And finally, to help us with that, we're creating another task force. Beginning, middle, and end. The implementation task force is going to begin this semester. It will last approximately 1 year. It's going to be composed, Jennifer and I are going to co-chair it. It will have 2 members from the planning subgroup, 1 member from the group on resources, 1 member from the group on student services, and 1 member from governance. The idea is, as Stan summarized for you, we have all these new manuals with timelines and charges and responsibilities. But now, the rubber is meeting the road. We have to do it. And while it was done with the best of intentions, sometimes what happens is you don't think of the consequences of doing something on this month over on that month. Or because this person has to be on this committee and that committee, those committees can't have meetings that overlap. And then all of a sudden, things get thrown into a tizzy. Oh, we can't meet our deadlines. We can't do this. The implementations task force chore will be to assist, not oversee, not nitpick, but to assist all of the committees that are trying to implement these manuals, to help them identify any potential issues, and then basically to leave it to the senates to do what they're supposed to do, which is if an issue has identified either in governance or in planning or in resource allocation, then those issues need to be discussed, possible fixes need to be discussed, and eventually the manuals need to be changed. But sometimes you need some outside eyes to see that, and also you need resource people who kind of understood, they were in the room while the manuals were being written, because we know what we meant. But sometimes it's not clear to someone else reading it. It's like I tell my students, I know what I meant in that question. So it makes perfect sense to me, but it may not make sense to you. So you need to ask. You need to not be afraid to ask, because that's my job, to answer questions. That will be a lot of our job in the implementation task force, to answer questions, to clarify things, and hopefully help the committees pick right up and just keep on going, and then we will fade out at the end of the year. Okay. Any questions?
Throughout this process, as we have gotten more and more excited about the quality of the work and the things that we're constructing, the governance and decision-making processes, and finally sitting down and talking about how authorities are divided up and how things can coexist but not conflict, and how we can have good timelines for planning. And we see now how we can put reminders in place so that none of the institutional obligations get away from us. We've gotten very excited about everything we've written down. I think what's powerful about what Thea just shared is this time, and what we hope the team sees, and what we hope we show as evidence in our show cause report, is the big question we've all been asking ourselves is, are we actually going to implement this? I think we've had plans before. I think we've had, intentions before. But structures like this are new now. This is kind of a different level of commitment than what we've done before. And I think it's powerful because it's going to demonstrate to everybody that we're in this change for the long haul and we're feeling good about the direction that it's taking us. The last area that we wanted to talk about gives me an opportunity to introduce our last presenter for today, and that's Dr. Jennifer La Serna. And Jennifer has, much like Thea, been not only here all summer long and not putting in countless hours. And yeah, you can say, well, that's the Vice President of Academic Services. That's her job. She's the Accreditation Liaison Officer. That's what she's supposed to do. And those are true statements. But the other thing is she's a mom, and she's a wife, and this is a family who also, in the middle of all of this, sold a house and moved. And if it weren't enough to be working on this 12 hours a day, to have those other things going on in your personal life and being able to navigate those. And from my perspective as a president, I never have felt a moment like she wasn't 150% on top of her job. So I don't want to miss the opportunity to say thank you to Jennifer as I introduce her, and she's going to talk to us about the actual show cause report.
Thanks, Stan. And then we have to do our day jobs because I don't know if you guys know, but we've had a federal auditor here for 3 days. So all of a sudden, 100% of my focus from a show cause is now on an audit. So that's been really interesting. But we did really well, so we're excited about that. Okay, so we are now in the midst, we're toward the end, I hope, of writing the show cause report. And so you guys understand kind of how that happened is the team of the 45-member team that's been working on all aspects of our sanctions and our recommendations. They have worked all spring to do the work, to get everything pulled together to get that done. And then they each provided an outline, basically. So it's an outline of what were the issues, how did we address those issues, and what evidence do we have to show that we've addressed those issues. And so our team of writers received that feedback from the different groups. And then this summer, what we did is we spent time writing that and putting it together. And it's still a work in progress, but there's several people that took a lot of time to write parts of the report. And I do want to thank Dr. Kristen Hollabaugh, John Bratch, Brent Calvin, Stan has written some sections. Joni Jordan has written a lot for me. And so there's a whole group, and I've probably forgotten a couple people, but all of those people have been really busy writing the different sections of the report. And then the next step then is pulling it all together and reading it and looking at unity of it. And so Thea has been helping with that, Dr. Trimble has, and now the next step is putting together our editing team and our evidence team. So you see kind of the flow. There's two reports that we had to submit. One is the show cause report, and the other one is our closure report. With the show cause report, we have our recommendations, we have our standards, and then we have evidence for each of those. So we have to actually have links to evidence of that. We aren't just saying that we did it, but that we actually did these things or that we're implementing these things. And we have to have electronic versions as well as binders of hard copies. So thanks to all the faculty and the division chairs and the deans have been pulling together syllabi and all kinds of evidence for us. And that's the work we're going to continue through the month of September. So the second part of that is the closure report. And that's not the exciting part of this at all, but we are required to submit a closure report. And so Stan and Brent Calvin have been working on that, and we should have a draft out of that by the end of the week for everyone to see what that's contained. It's really a template that the ACCJC and other districts provided us with a template, and so we followed that template and put in our own information. So it's not something we really can change, but we're sending it out for your information. So where we are now is we're in the final stages of the first draft of the show cause report, and we should have at least the basis to pull that together on Friday. And the editing team will be coming together to take a first look at it. At the same time, the month of September, it will be going to Academic Senate, Student Senate, and District Governance Senate for input and feedback. And we're not looking for grammatical changes or punctuation or things like that. That's what the editing team will be doing. But we're looking for error of fact or things that are missing. There's some content missing or we've gotten something wrong. That's what we're looking for. The editing team, Thea and I are, Dr. Trimble and I are co-chairing, and Matt Bure from Math, Christian Anderson from Social Sciences, Dr. Kristen Hollabaugh, and Dr. Dolly Ozturk will be sitting on that editing team. And for those of you who haven't met Dr. Ozturk, he's our brand new researcher, and he's sitting right there. Wave your hand, Dolly. So that's Dr. Ozturk. We're really excited to have a full-time director of research on board and working with us. The second part of that is the evidence. So the evidence is huge, and we've been taking some input from our physical therapy program, from Jonna Shingle and from Karen Roberts in nursing about all of the work that we have to pull together and how they present it. And we've been following basically how they've done it, and they've obviously had really good success in all of their accreditation reports, so we're utilizing them. And so we've asked Joni Jordan and Karen Roberts to co-chair our evidence team, and they're working with Annette Giegold, Conti C, and Ryan Barry Souza from the research office. And so we really feel confident that those are the people that really know how this can be pulled together. And Joni's worked on a lot of accreditation, as well as she's our resident expert on the outcomes and assessment piece, so she'll be able to really make sure that that looks good. So those two teams we have our first meetings this week, and we'll be starting to pull that together. And you guys should expect to start seeing drafts by Monday, Monday's a holiday, so Tuesday at the latest, we'll start seeing drafts out there. The show cause report is due October 15th. So at the same time that we're doing that, my office will be formatting the document, pulling it together, and then it will go to Kevin McCusker and Dave Cargill on October 1st, and they will do the final things they need to do and get it off to the printer for printing, and then it goes to the ACCJC, the Accrediting Commission, on October 15th. Our visit will be in November, and again, we don't know the exact dates yet. We expect it will be 3 to 4 people from the original team that we had, and that they will be here sometime the second week in November. It'll be a shorter visit. They'll probably only be here 3 days, and they'll have our report in advance, and then they'll look for the evidence and probably want to interview some people during those days that they're here. They will do an exit interview with Stan. I don't believe they're going to do the big public exit interview here, but we'll keep you updated on that. And then they will send their report to the commission. The commission meets in January, and at that time, Stan and I will have an opportunity to go up, and we have 5 whole minutes to address them, and then answer any questions that they might have at that time. And then we will find out a month later what the results are of the report and the visit. So those, that's all up there, but that's the basics of where we are now and where we're going. So the main thing now is once you get the report, read it, get feedback on it, and give feedback on it. And we all really need to be able to understand what we've promised in there, what we've said we're doing, what we're going to do, because it needs to come from the whole campus community. It's not just me who put it together. It's not just Thea who put it together. It's not just Stan who put it together. It's a group of people, and the whole campus has embraced this. We've seen the work that the entire faculty have been doing on outcomes and assessment, and the work that the staff have been doing on our service area outcomes. So everybody put this report together, and we need to really understand it and see the things that we've promised in there. So that's the basics of that. Are there any questions? Good. Okay.
Just a couple quick comments in closing. First of all, this is the first of the series. We've got 4 more forums coming up in September. They really are the meat and potatoes of this show cause report. Thea went through the topics for you. We'd love to double, triple the size of this audience. We'd love to fill this room for those forums. So please emphasize the importance of it. We will too. Speak to your colleagues. In an attempt to try to get as much participation as we could, we picked an hour during the day when we studied our master schedule that had the least number of classes scheduled, and that happened to be between 3 and 4 on all 3 campuses. We also are varying the days, so this forum is on a Wednesday, the next one will be on a Tuesday, and then back to a Wednesday, so that it accommodates different instructors if they have Tuesday, Wednesday classes. So please encourage your colleagues to come. I think the most important thing we've said today, aside from all the technical work, is that we need to know this stuff. We need to know it and we need to understand it. The other thing I want to make sure that I share is we couldn't have done all of this work without the support of our board. We have a good College of the Sequoias Board of Trustees. They too spent time this summer learning and training themselves, attending conferences on their own time. Coming in and leaving their work and leaving their families and their kids and spending half days with us to get trained on the board's role in accreditation. And in a lot of ways, I think they were most helpful with us by understanding what their role was and then giving us the authority and support we needed to carry out our role. So representing them here today is our board president, Lori Cardoza, and I just wanted to thank you, Lori, and thank you for being here today as well. You know, Jennifer mentioned the closure report, and I've had a number of you email me. Maybe 4 or 5 of you have emailed me and said, hey, Stan, we're a little worried about the closure report. Is that something we should see? What's it going to look like? We have the closure report just about done. Jennifer said Brent and I have been working on it. Brent really has been our leader on the closure report. He's accessed a couple of our consultants and several of our colleagues in 3 other institutions that have had to go through this. So he's working with the professionals in other institutions who had to write their closure reports and finding out what kind of feedback they got to make sure that ours is one step better than that. So I'm confident that we'll have a good closure report, if that's not an oxymoron. But I will tell you this, we want to make sure you all see it. Like Jennifer said, it's not the kind of report where we're going to open it up for input because it's prescribed by law what we have to do. It's very sobering, you guys. It's not intended to be a downer, but we would be remiss if the visiting team comes and they ask, you know, did you guys know you had to do a closure report? Did you see your closure report? We have to be transparent. We have to say, yes, you had the opportunity to see that. But there's some sobering things in there. It talks about how you sell off your assets. How do you get rid of your publicly owned buildings? How do you transfer your students and make sure that they're successfully taken care of? And how are their student records, official records, properly transferred and accounted for? And did you meet with your neighboring institutions and establish agreements so that they could receive your students? It's that kind of stuff. You know, how are you helping your employees transition? It's that kind of stuff. So we will have the closure report out just so that you can understand that that was an element that we had to do. It lends that final sense of seriousness and urgency, I think, to this for all of us. And at the same time, when you see all the work we've done in the strength of our actual show cause report, it makes it even, for me, even that much more powerful, and I'm that much prouder. Yesterday, I happened to have the opportunity, a handful of us drove up to Merced Community College for what's called the Chancellor's Circle. And Dr. Bryce Harris, our current state chancellor for community colleges, holds 3 little chancellor circles over the course of the year, one in the north, one in central part of the state, one in the south. And it's a chance to come to a college and they host, and the chancellor speaks about everything that's happening at the chancellor's office, connections to the legislature, what's going on with recent budget. He talked yesterday about the scorecard, timelines for implementation, what's happening in 2014, what we can look for in 2015. Great opportunity to just go, and it was close enough. Merced was as close as it was going to be this year, so we drove up. Merced College happened to be, just like us, having finished a lot of new construction and modernization. So one of the things they did as our host is they said, hey, we'd like to spend 15 minutes and take you all on a quick tour, walk around the campus and show you some of the new things that we've done. So the whole group of people kind of gets up and starts migrating out and walking along with the tour, you know. And the chancellor's kind of bringing up the rear. He's a very, soft-spoken guy, kind of stays in the back, not in the spotlight. Great speaker, though. I love listening to him. He's got a lot of years in community college. And so I just kind of hung back there with him, because I know he's been in the middle of the turmoil at San Francisco City College. He's had to appoint an executor. So kind of from one president to another, I sauntered up alongside of him. I go, "So are you still standing, Chancellor?" And he says, "Yeah." He goes, "I am." He goes, "Man, it's a tug of war." He goes, "We really have a lot of work to do." And he knew exactly what I was talking about. And I said, "Well, if it's any consolation on behalf of College of the Sequoias, we're fixing to take one of those bricks out of your cart. We think we have a great process underway. We have a faculty and a team that's come together, and we're really excited about the opportunity to show the visiting team the changes we're going to make at COS." And he said, "Well, I have something to tell you." He said, "The word out among community colleges is that we should bottle how they're doing it at College of the Sequoias, because that's the process that people should be looking at to model." And I think that comes from the time that we've spent with Dr. Bino, from the energy that we've put in, from the expertise we have of our faculty who have done this before, and the fact that we decided we weren't going to fight. We got the news the same time San Francisco did, right? And they're fighting still, and we're almost done. So I'm excited about that, and I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to thank all of you for that, because I couldn't have made those comments to him if we wouldn't have come together the way that we have. So we don't have anything else to share with you specifically today. I think the last slide says what COS 2.0 is all about, and it continues to remind us of the important components of that. And we will be back here. Our next date is September the 3rd, and reminders will be coming out. Are there any questions we can answer for any of you, or would anybody like to make any final comments for the good of the order before we sign off to our audience in Hanford and Tulare? Very good. Took us 45 minutes. This forum is adjourned. Thank you.